Welcome everyone to the 2022 Manitoba Virtual Summit from the Manitoba Protein Consortium. We're going to be hosting a panel discussion today on improving transparency, productivity, and sustainability through digital innovation. It's a pre-recorded session, so all of those listening in are welcome to ask questions in the chat. And our panel members here will try to respond on the go because they'll be available in the chat as we listen. I'm your host of the panel, Christine Tapley. So I'm a member of the Manitoba Protein Consortium, leading Project Aspire. I'm also an agricultural sustainable lead with Ducks Unlimited Canada and a beef farmer here where I live in Manitoba. So I'm going to turn it over to our experts to introduce themselves, who are speaking with us today. And so first off, Marcel Joaquin, partner and co-founder of IQ Digitech Incorporated, please.
Thanks, Christine. My name is Marcel Joaquin. I'm partner and co-founder of IQ Digitech, a software firm. We started in 2016. Our clients are not exclusively in the food industry, although we have a number of clients in the food industry because of a product called IQ Food Chain that we've developed for food traceability. Our clients span law firms and multinational firms and some governments as well. But my main interest today is to talk about the importance of digital traceability in the food system. Myself, prior to starting this IT firm, I was vice president of Manitoba Harvest Hemp Foods, which is a consumer packaged branded food protein. So we'd like sustainable protein, and of course, it is distributed in over 15,000 retail outlets, but we're proud that it's from Manitoba.
Great, welcome Marcel, thank you. Wade, if you could introduce yourself a minute.
Sure, great. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Wade Barnes, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Farmer's Edge. You'll have to excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. It's not COVID, but it's just a regular old-fashioned cold. Not that anybody gets those anymore, but Farmer's Edge was founded back in 2005, but myself and the other co-founder, a real focus around precision agriculture, connecting the dots for growers. We really evolved around the view around data. We took our first round of investment from a big firm called Kleiner Perkins in Silicon Valley, and really sort of progressed our thinking around, I would say, intensive field data. And then, about a year ago, last March, we did an IPO. Part of that IPO strategy was around what was going to happen in the carbon markets. And so we see, a huge opportunity, what's going to happen in the carbon economy around scope 3 emissions, insets. We think that this is sort of the next big thing in agriculture. And we all know that, 40% of most of the food companies' emissions are connected to the grain that they buy at the farm. So our goal is to connect that farm, get that really important data, process it for it, and then help really either create insets or offsets for the grower and provide that type of credible traceability. That's going to be, I think, absolutely a necessary thing going forward in the marketplace globally. So excited to be on the panel. I think it's perfect timing, and look forward to chatting with everybody and hearing all their thoughts. So
great, thanks, Wade. Michelle, you're up next.
Thanks, Christine. Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Nutting. I work for Nutrien. I'm located in Calgary, Alberta. I'm the global lead for sustainable agriculture and environmental sustainability on our corporate team, and I've been leading the implementation of Nutrien's carbon program in Canada. I think everybody that's on the call probably knows Nutrien. We are the world's leading supplier of crop inputs. We have a large retail presence in Western Canada and a lot of agronomists in the field working directly with farmers. I'm really excited to join the panel today to hear from some real digital experts. I'm an agronomist. I've been with the company for 32 years, and I'm really approaching this carbon space and digital discussion from the perspective of having worked with our agronomy team in the field and their farm customers as we look at the digital tools that are available and in development to help farmers understand this new emerging market opportunity, I would say, in the environmental and sustainable space in agriculture. So really pleased to join the panel today. Thanks, Christine.
Welcome. And finally, Jacques Wilford, please.
Yes, thank you. So welcome everybody, and it's an honor to be invited also in this panel, all the way from Europe. But that's I think nice that I can join this. So I'm working as a senior scientist at Wageningen University and Research, and there I'm working basically on the theme what I call now digital innovation. That is based on a lot of research projects and innovation projects that I basically coordinated in Europe. So many projects at the European level, also sometimes on the national level. And we work on the application of all kind of new digital innovations in the agri-food sector, from farm to fork and in different sectors. Yeah, what you see in the back is the logo of our current project, which is called Smart Agri Hubs, and which we also, as Wade referred to, try to connect the dots. Because yeah, I'm working on this already quite a long time, but still, yeah, we see that there's a lot of fragmentation and discontinuity and digital innovation in the agri-food sector. And so at the geographical scale, you see that there are the same digital innovations happening everywhere, but they don't know from each other. So yeah, there's a big risk that they are reinventing the wheel all the time. They don't have access to the knowledge. And so therefore, we try to create a network so that we try to connect these dots. But also a very important other aspect is the discontinuity and innovation. And so there's a lot of public funding usually and new digital technologies. So nowadays everybody is looking at AI. But at the other hand, there is a lot of activity going on more from the private side on startups. But yeah, we say, or we see that there is a lot of need to focus also on the middle of this whole innovation pathway. So where you make more sustainable and integrated applications for the agri-food sector, for the end users over there. So yeah, that's what I'm working on from a scientific perspective. And I'm glad to discuss this topic with you in this panel.
Welcome. Okay, well, that's quite the crew we have. Excited to hear what you guys have to say about some of these questions. So I think we can just jump right in. Of course, digital innovation is moving and evolving very quickly, something that I think all four of you mentioned in your opener. But maybe starting with that national lens and looking at Canadian food production and distribution, thinking about what trends we're seeing in digital innovation, and what do you think are the most impact that it'll have to our protein industry in the next 5 to 10 years. So maybe can we think about how to give the audience a feel for what you're already working on and what you see coming to have impact either on meeting consumer demand or that's had impact on your business strategy, to kind of give us a feel for how are we putting this in application? And can we just use maybe the same order, this first question? So Marcel, I would kick it back to you if that's all right. You're just on mute there, Marcel.
Okay, that's my favorite saying in this whole pandemic. Hey, you're on mute. So yeah, thank you for that. And so when I was looking at this question, I always looked at and the way I answer all the different questions that are here is it depends on what your strategy is as far as the how you're going to digitize your operations. You can either be someone who is innovative and wants to shape the market, in which case you're probably not going to do that much benchmarking, or you can be someone who simply has a commodity product that's wanting to make some modifications to create some sort of superiority of that your product just happens to be more sustainable than others. And so what any claims that you're going to make as far as what you're going to deliver with your digital solutions need to have some sort of a foundation. And we look at the traceability and the verifiability and the authenticity of the information as critical to developing your brand. Because as we go and move towards sustainability, we do know that sustainability can never be commoditized. It is something that needs to be proven, and it has to be verifiable. And so that's why the traceability solutions is something that we do see as an important element in order to be able to prove that your claims around sustainability. I do find that also you've got to look at the trends that are there to determine what type of digital solutions you're trying to solve, to match that to solve. Whether with the pandemic, of course, we've all advanced. I'd like to say most companies have had no choice but to advance their digital transformation so that, in fact, it makes them more resilient. Okay, and I think it's very painful, but I would like to think that we're coming out of this pandemic a lot more resilient with the increased use of digital technology.
Yeah, well, to build off of what Marcel said, I mean, I think that one of the important aspects that I think in order to allow for this emerging opportunity in sustainability is really a focus on the farmer. The biggest challenge that I think that the supply chain has is the farmer himself. I think once grain gets into a processing plant or gets into from an elevator to a processing plant, off to a grocery store, that's an easier way to create traceability than dealing with a massive amount of farmers across, Western Canada, North America. I think, some of the challenges is really how our grain industry, our food system is built. It's built for scale. When a unit train shows up at an elevator, they want the grain buyers want to get on the phone and start calling farmers and just to start hauling. And they don't really want to have to start figuring out where you fit in the sustainability element. They've got a unit train, they've got so many hours to fill it, and then it's got to get moving. And so I think that a big part as we think about digitalization is that we have to figure out how we make this easy and scalable for the farm without losing the credibility of the data set. Because I think the one thing I've learned in the last year, as we start to focus on offsets, how much work it is in order to ensure that those offsets that we're creating are credible. And the buyers that are buying those offsets, that's absolutely critical to them. I think that, what I've heard is that, the tech companies, oil and gas, they all want to buy green offsets. That's forestry or agriculture. But in forestry, you really don't know what you're getting. Some folks planting trees on the side of a mountain, or I've heard the term guys with guns guarding rainforests. But in agriculture, the technology is really there to measure this. And we have the ability today to implement this at a farm level or get the farmers using the actual tools that they actually already have on their farm. So I think that, if you look at Western Canada or Canada as a whole, there's a huge opportunity here to really create that digitalization at that farm, get that data, make it easy, and then really be able to build out. And that will draw people in, because my my view is, and I might be wrong, I'm a farmer, and I don't think farmers want to sell offsets. I think farmers would much rather sell insets to people that they do business with, and inside that supply chain. And I think that's where this will go, but we have to have that digital infrastructure so that it's easy to get this data. Because if I've heard that in the US, that when people are trying to create offsets at a farm level, it could take a farmer up to 80 hours of his time. And if you ever met a 10,000 acre farmer somewhere in Western Canada, he's not going to give you 80 hours of his time to go out and create offsets. You're going to have to figure out a way to do it in a way that doesn't change his life. So I think that that's a critical component for us, is the digitalization of the farm gate. The connected farm is really what's going to open the door to this opportunity.
Great, Michelle.
I'm going to build on what Wade said there a little bit. What I see as really a key trend is the work that's happening on the interoperability and the integration amongst kind of the digital data sets that farms currently have. And, farms have been using precision farming and collecting a lot of digital data for quite a number of years. But I think the trend that we're seeing is really that networking that is happening between all of the different digital data tool providers to really have that conversation about interoperability and integration of those current farm data management or farm data collection tools, and pivoting those tools to the needs of sustainability programs or carbon crediting programs. So for me, those are the real key trends that we're seeing in digital innovation. And I guess what I'm hopeful for is, while it's a very competitive space, we're really trying to understand how to enable that movement of data from equipment that's on the farm into a sustainability platform, and then flow that information through the value chain in a way that meets that buyer of that sustainable attribute, whether it's a carbon attribute, a water attribute, or some other attribute of sustainability. It's how are these digital data networks being developed in order to enable that flow of information and then get to scale. I know we're a limited time here on the panel, so I think I'm going to pass it over to Sajak because he probably has a lot to say on this as well. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, what shall I still add to that? But I think it's clear from the previous speakers that data is the key word. In the end, everything is all about the data. But I think, as Michelle was referring to, it's data is being produced by devices. And there you see a clear trend in the last decades, so to say, that in the past, this data was stored in management systems, for example, farm management systems or chain information systems. But increasingly, you see now that there are all kind of smart devices being introduced in the Internet of Things, as we call it. So there are all kind of new sensors or cameras on drones being introduced. Of course, more advanced data analytics is taking place, and then also to execute management, robotics is on the way. So all this data is not stored anymore in the usual systems, although they still play a role, of course, but also in these machines, and that can result also in quite disruptive business models, because that's I don't know if you agree with the discussion or with the point that the technology as such is never disruptive. It's always about the business model that is behind it. And so clear examples from other domains. The example that is usually referred to is Uber with the taxi driving. Yeah, if you look at the technology, it's not rocket science. It is not very disruptive technology, but it's more the business model that was and is behind it. And then you can mention numerous other examples like Airbnb, etc., to illustrate that. And so I think that similar developments are taking place in the agri-food sector, although in general I could say, yeah, it's lagging behind. And so that's something we try to stimulate and also to learn from mistakes. So how do we avoid, if we want to, but I think everybody wants to avoid that. Yeah, there will be in the end a big monopolist player that has all the data and all the power in his hands. And talking about business models, I think that's what it is all about. I think what we learned in a previous project, it was a very large-scale pilot on the Internet of Things in Europe. It was called the Internet of Food and Farm 2020, is to focus on shared business models. So yeah, what you see is that what I said in my introduction, there is a lot of focus from the private investor side to look at promising startups. And I think that's quite okay. But what you see there that you focus only on one actor, on one player that is trying to have a successful business model. But if you look at the digital solutions that are needed, you usually have also other players that play a role and that also need to have a viable business model in order to have a sustainable shared business model in the end. So for example, if the infrastructure provider that is providing the network infrastructure doesn't see a good business model in a certain digital solution, then yeah, it will not be sustainable in the end. So yeah, that's what we worked on in that project from the very beginning, to discuss with all the relevant stakeholders in a certain development of a digital solution to find a shared business model. And that the conclusion was that it was not always so easy, and that yeah, at the end, some of the digital solutions that were being developed still were put on hold because well, there was not a clear business model behind it. Yeah, and I think what was also touched upon, I think what you see now, looking at these data, that the role of data infrastructure, but also the role of data platforms around it, is indeed something that will be very important, I think, in the future.
It sounds like one of the bottlenecks for adoption of some of these innovations are finding that shared model and how we can kind of collaborate and connect. Are there other bottlenecks you see of that are impeding the adoption of some of these strategies? Jack, I'll keep on with you for a minute.
You're asking at me, or?
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, sometimes it's difficult to understand, but yeah. So I think that has also been mentioned. There are certainly still technical issues, especially on interoperability of data to share data between different devices and systems. But I think especially, there are more bottlenecks on the organizational side. So one of them, I think I already mentioned, is more on the business models, but also on governance. And I think we will certainly go into that. So how about creating trust around sharing data, and also to keep track of data and to secure privacy and confidentiality. I think in the end, if you also look at other domains, I already referred to examples like Uber or take Facebook, or well, we know the discussions. I think in the end, it's not so much about the technical bottlenecks that are there, but more about these more social or organizational bottlenecks.
I'm gonna move on a little bit, but please, any of you feel free to jump back to the bottleneck notion, but I just want to try and get through some more of the topics because we have limited time, of course. But something that's come up a few times now is that connectivity and integration throughout the supply chain, and of course, something forefront for Manitoba Protein is the circular economy concept and how this requires collaboration throughout the entire value chain. So I'm wondering if we can speak to how digital innovation might improve circularity within the protein sector, or how we could position Manitoba to be a leader in that space, and really thinking about how to grasp that through that integration and connectivity. I'm not sure who wants to jump in there, but I see Michelle nodding along, so maybe I'll pass it back to you, and then Marcel and Wade, if that's all right.
Sure, Christine, it's a really interesting question. I think I would tackle this in a couple of ways. The conversation about circularity is very complex, and I think there is a real key interest, value, role for the protein industry to play in circularity. But the question in my mind is really, what is the value or the attribute that is being looked for in a circularity conversation, and who is willing to invest in that attribute? It comes back a little bit to what's the clear value proposition for the sustainability metric, and then how do we quantify that in a way that can be seen as supported by robust science and agreed by all players in the value chain. And this is where it gets very difficult. You know, we're taking an approach right now where in our sustainability platforms and our carbon program, we're looking at what are the protocols, the methods that are out there that are agreed with science to be showing an improvement, whether that's from better manure management, better nutrient management, or better land management practices. First, we have to start by looking at what are those scientific methods for measuring what's better. And this is where it gets really complex, I would say. When we start looking at manure management on land and how we account for the contribution that manure management makes in terms of improving soil quality and soil health, and then looking at it in a circular approach and quantifying what does that mean in terms of emissions from livestock, reduced emissions from livestock, reduced emissions from fertilizer, increased soil carbon sequestration. When we are talking about this kind of complexity and we think about who's the downstream buyer, let's say, that is paying for the sustainability attribute that's being created, they want to assure that they are getting a measurable and real sustainability attribute. And I would say right now, our ability with the science that we have that is looking at circularity is lagging. So I would say that farm management practices do a good job of thinking about and managing circularity within their farms, but our ability to quantify that and verify it in a way that to a sustainable attribute buyer is verifiable and real is a challenge and a bottleneck. So that's kind of the development that needs to continue to happen in this space. And I think it's going to take some time and patience as we see agriculture really pivoting into creating this value and science trying to catch up, and groups that are judging the quality of agriculture trying to figure out what does it mean when I don't have all the science yet, but I'm trying to move my whole system in a directionally correct, actionable approach. I've said a lot of stuff. Hopefully it's answered some of the question that you've posed there.
Thank you. Okay, Marcel, if you would like to weigh in.
Sure, thanks, Christine. Yeah, I'm thinking when you think of circular economy, I'm looking at what's the outcome of a perfect circular economy with respect to food products. And we had some conversations with the University of Guelph, and we were helping them do some research on packaging, so that, you know, circular economy sounds like, you know, you want to be able to reuse something so that there is, you're minimizing the waste byproduct. And the approach that I've had some experience in was in our company. Really, we're doing quite a good job, because with the hemp seed that's grown out of Dauphin area there, we were pressing those to come up with hemp oil. And for many years, that was one of our main products. And the byproduct of that is a meal. And then we basically just threw it out, or had some farmers, Wade, probably your clients, take it and put it back into their field because they felt that, it had some nutrients that can go back. Well, lo and behold, we discovered that the meal contained quite a high, high quantities of protein, depending on how you mill it or whether you put it through a spray dry process. Okay, you can get it as high as 70% protein. And so, to make a long story short, through product innovation, I'd like to think we contributed to the circular economy because what used to be a waste became a product, a protein product at that, and being worth 0% of the sales, right, as opposed to 80%, it actually flipped over within about 5 years because we found out people are actually much more interested in protein powder than they are at hemp oil. And so I think within the circular economy, some product innovations in the food space is probably going to turn some of what we see as byproduct, probably which counts as food waste, into some innovative, much more high value, like protein products.
Thank you. Yeah, that's something that I get very excited about is those byproducts and their role in feed more than food, but that's just my background. And so I think it also has a role in maybe dampening some of the risk of production, again, on the beef side. I won't ask any of you to talk about beef today, but I do want to talk about risk. And of course, as you all are very aware, risk is such an important part of agriculture, and we face many types of risk. Market availability, we're seeing disruptions to distribution, of course, right now. Climate is going to continue to be a bigger and bigger risk. So taking that back to digital innovation, I'm wondering if there are specific mitigation or risk mitigation that we can talk about of how that will apply to agriculture, and are there specific areas maybe that you feel they'll apply larger than others in that space? And Wade, I want to turn it over to you because of the connection you've already made to farmer, and for me this question really relates to the farmer and then has implications up the value chain, but you can all interpret it in your own way.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that as we implement this digital infrastructure on farms, the opportunity that comes out of it is just enormous. And so I'll maybe touch on like a bottleneck. So when you think about the opportunity around digitalization is how do you get farms digitalized? And so I think back to, years ago when we first came up with the environmental farm plan, and farmers hated the idea of it. And then they went through it and they received some funding. And a lot of that funding was around precision agricultural equipment. And I would say that is the foundation of how precision ag, and I've been, and Michelle's probably the same, Canada became kind of a world leader for farmers implementing these type of technologies, and it came from the backs of that environmental farm plan. I mean, the amount of farmers that took advantage of that was huge. And so why I bring that up, you think about what the government can do. If they were to implement a similar process around the digitalization, not precision ag equipment, but the focus around data and information. And if you could get 80% of the farms that could go out every time they made a pass in the field, that data was collected. Every time they planted, every time they combined, they had all of that information. And if you had all of that information, what you can do with it's powerful. Now it's that whole sort of chain of custody and the ability to go out and move that to your suppliers. But when you think about risk management, a piece of that is around insurance and what's going to happen. So you've got an element that you could completely change the landscape for farmers and how they utilize insurance today. You can, because, I'll give you an example. Where I farm, my insurance rate is 30 bushels to the acre of canola, but I don't ever try to target for 30 bushels to the acre. I target for 50, right? And don't always get it, but the insurance that you have doesn't really cover to where you are today. If you think about it, even going further, a risk management for suppliers. As suppliers, this is the first time that I can think of that an actual end user can have a relationship with a farmer. It's never really been done before, right? That the whole industry has been built out of, if I'm General Mills, I contact Richardson's, I need X amount. They go out to the country and find the wheat, the oats, the canola, and then they bring it in and ship it to you. Well, what digitalization does is enable a food company to have a relationship with a whole bunch of different farmers. They never have to meet them. They never have to go out and shake their hand, but they have this connection. And, when it comes down to whether it be at a transaction of buying, grain, or even to be able to create that visibility of I've got a farmer that's under contract, one farmer, but actually I've got 15,000 of them, and I can monitor the fields, and I know where the grain production is and whether I'm going to have a bad crop or a good crop. Suddenly now the digitalization enables farmers to get, protect themselves with different insurance product, with lending, create new opportunities around sustainability and marketing, but it also allows the supply chain to actually have visibility that's happening at a farm level. Now, if you talk to the average day farmer, they'll freak them out. They won't like that. They don't think, but long term, think about it. And what I say to farmers is, this is something when you as a farmer, you can have a direct relationship with a food company. And when a food company, they have a direct relationship with a farmer. And if that can be built on the backs of technology, that's powerful. That's a win for the farmer. That's shifting the tables in the farmer's direction. And I think that the government can implement this on scale by just doing something pretty similar to what they did a few years ago with the environmental farm plan. And if you could get that type of technology on the farms, and that's just modems and tractors collecting data, I mean, it's a powerful, powerful concoction.
Thank you. Michelle, did you want to add on any of the risk topic or anything that relatedly out there?
Yeah, I think risk is really important in this discussion. And first of all, an understanding of the risk in the value chain is a really important step and component. And so building a little bit on what Wade said, in Manitoba, in our carbon program, we have a downstream partner in that program. So Maple Leaf Foods came into the program with us. And what some of the first steps were really to understand what Maple Leaf was looking for in their perspective, which is low carbon grain production for their animal feed, and how that relates to the decisions and the risk that are taken on farm in order to produce a crop that has a lower carbon intensity. So step one was really understanding how that risk represents itself or presents itself within the farming system and the decisions, the management decisions that have to be made in order to produce that kind of, let's say, carbon intensity value product that a downstream player is looking for. And once there's a greater understanding of the actions, the costs on farm to do that, and the outcomes that can be created, then we can start to have a conversation about what it means for a company like Maple Leaf to work with a retailer like Nutrien Ag Solutions and be part of the conversation with the grower. The grower is selling an asset, which is a carbon asset, to the downstream buyer. But if there's not a conversation that starts with understanding the risks and the opportunities through that whole value chain, then I think we miss the opportunity to mitigate some of that risk at the farm level. And really important to that is good measurement tools. Being able to record, measure, and estimate what the outcomes are going to be on the farm and what it's going to take then in terms of risk mitigation to maybe make a shift in the management practices to transform agriculture to produce a commodity that might be carbon rather than a commodity that is the crop that we've historically been used to producing. So for me in risk mitigation, I'm looking at it through the lens of the farmer being connected to that end buyer and all the components that it takes. And what we're learning in our project is really starting at that beginning conversation about what is risk, measurably what is it, and then how can we mitigate it by taking a whole value chain approach so that there's value at the farm level and there's value for that end buyer, if you will, of the carbon asset in this case, or the environmental attribute that's being produced. So I'm really hopeful for increasing these conversations through the value chain and being able to come up with better risk mitigation that works for everybody in the value chain.
I'm going to turn over to you, Jacques, now, and then maybe Marcel to follow up. But I wanted to touch on, Wade had mentioned the kind of the data ownership conversation, and Michelle spoke a lot just there about communication through that value chain and the importance of that. And so, Jacques, I was wondering if you might touch on that debate about ownership and sovereignty of data, and you know, how we can tackle that and make sure that we can move forward either collaboratively or in a way that will be helpful to the value chain.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, in Europe, we don't talk about data ownership anymore. So that's would be a simple answer. But I think also globally, everybody agrees that in the end, it's not about the ownership of data as such, but who has access. And how can you create added value with data? Because, well, if you have access to data, but you cannot do anything with it, then it doesn't make sense. But also maybe linking it a little bit with the previous point of risk. I think a nice example is that with the introduction of some digital technologies that actually build upon more existing technologies is the milking robot, which maybe especially in the Netherlands, but also in Europe, has quite a high adoption rate. But what happened there is, of course, that it was first introduced to change the milking system so that the cows were automatically milked. But gradually, with all these new digital innovations, it was there were more attributes added to this milking robot. And nowadays they are able, with this milking robot, to measure also the quality of the milk. And these data was previously in the hands of the milking factory, for example, or maybe other advisory services. But now it potentially got into the hand of the manufacturer of these milking machines. But it dependent on who has access to these data from this milking robot. So that's I think also a risk that you can see around this ownership of data. And so, as I refer to this Internet of Things, there are now all kind of new devices being introduced, and these devices produce data. And then the question is, who has access to these data? And that can be a technical issue because, in essence, data are 0 and 1s, or bits and bytes. And so maybe you have access to these, but especially, for example, a farmer cannot do anything with it. And as soon as you transform these digital data, then there is quite an issue or a question on who has now the intellectual property around these data. And so in that sense, so we also I'm not a legal expert, but I discussed, and we discussed with lawyers, for example, and they said, it's actually quite a complex issue because data is not a physical product, and it can change very easily from one stage to another stage. So that's quite a difficult issue. And actually, I have to be honest that there are still many bottlenecks to be solved over here. But coming a little bit then how to solve this. So I think on the one hand, you need in the end legislation, but the legislation is usually running behind. I think worldwide we have now quite good legislation on privacy, but I think most of the agricultural data that we're talking about is not so much personal data. So these laws, this legislation is not really applicable to that. But at least I don't know how it is in Canada, but I think you see developments everywhere. But in Europe now they are developing new data acts, also on artificial intelligence. There are new acts coming up that try to canalize or to support these developments from a legislative perspective. But as I said, usually, yeah, this takes some time, and the need is already there now. So other approaches are creating code of conducts, and I think also in several countries worldwide, there are these code of conducts that at least can help to set some rules and some agreements on how are you going to share data with each other. And I think, this has to be further developed. But as I said, I think there are many issues still to be solved.
Marcel, would you like to build on the idea of data ownership?
Yeah, thanks, Sanj. Yeah, Jacques is right about some of the important barriers here. We're talking about the data and the barriers, right? And oh, by the way, I just wanted to backtrack just if I may, just a little bit about the risk. So in Canada, because I was a member of the federal government, and we administered something called farm income programs, like Agri-Stability and Agri-Invest. And I do know that when I was there, it took a while to process these applications. And really, that is an area, it took months and months, and the Auditor General often mentioned, that this can be expedited or streamlined. So with the agri-stability programs for providing economic assistance to the primary producers in case of income drop, I think digitization of that data and being able to get away from a lot of what's largely manual processing could help a lot. Now, going into the data, one of the biggest barriers we ran into with the traceability is that it's something that people have encountered for have wanted traceability for the last 30, 40 years. It's nothing new, actually. And so at least we've got it down to something where Wade said, you got to keep it simple, even though it's going to be quite comprehensive. And so one way to reduce some of the barriers is to introduce some standards. I know the GS1 traceability standard has been developed. I know they have some guidance on the meat and poultry side. And of course, the produce traceability initiative has been going on for years as well. And I think we can reduce some of the barriers if there was an ability to adopt some of these standards, okay? But one of the barriers, of course, is that nobody wants to reveal their strategic supplier. When you want traceability, oh, that's what came from. Oh, I should contact them if you're getting such good products there. And so in order to overcome these barriers, we have to, beyond aggregation of the data and then being able to get some good data analytics at that level, I think we have to gain the trust of the players that, yes, you will protect my sources, and perhaps you even have some sort of a proprietary process, because when we do traceability, we only look for two things. One is something called a critical tracking event, which happens to transform a product, taking it apart, disassembly, or blending, or shipping. And the other one is, what are the key data elements? And throughout the conversations that we've been having, in order to integrate sustainability into the traditional traceability, we do have those. I understand what Wade is saying, that what do we track, right? And what will people be willing to give up without giving up their competitive advantage for the benefit of everyone? And so that's the challenge. And yeah, Christina, we've been trying to tackle this thing for like 30 years, okay? And I would like to think that digitization and being able to opt in and opt out, as opposed to saying, oh, you're part of our network for traceability, now you got to reveal everything. I think we're now at a stage where our technologies can allow people to opt in and opt out of certain data elements to protect their recipes, okay, or key suppliers. I think that's kind of the way to get this started, so that we say, no, you don't have to give up everything. You can select what to share.
We're almost at time. I just wanted to give everybody a chance to give maybe one final thought. Can't give you too much time. I know that we've covered a lot here, but if there's just maybe a final statement from each of you that we can share with the audience. Marcel, since you've been on there, I would like you to start, and then we'll work our way down the original order to Wade and Michelle and to Jacques, if you could just transition amongst yourselves for time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All of a sudden, I don't know if you can hear me. Oh yeah, you can hear me, right? Okay, great. Yeah. So one of the things that we've been really tracking around sustainability is the concept that major corporations have now discovered, and it's the concept of ESG. And somehow, whatever we do, whatever we digitize, whatever we decide to measure, will hopefully be something that those in the ESG, environmental, social, and governance parties, the ones who are interested in this for growing corporate values, we're hoping that we're tracking those so that whatever we are tracking for Manitoba Sustainable Protein actually counts towards that, okay? And so the biggest barrier right now, it's wild, wild west out there where everybody can define what ESG is, what is good standards. And I think we have to be careful and be aware that right now, a lot of the major corporations are focused just on governance, meaning saying, we're doing all these plans, we're going to be carbon neutral, be great, sustainable, but they don't actually go back and measure the results after. And I think if we can facilitate that type of thing with, being able to easily measure performance for these corporations, some of which are some of the biggest buyers of agriculture products for processing, I think we can really find out what the Manitoba Sustainable Protein branding really is. Okay.
Wade, some quick thoughts? Oh, sorry, this is Michelle. Wade.
Oh, if we still have just a minute, I would kind of sum it up like this. We're really pivoting with farmers on the use of the digital tools, data tools that they currently have on their farms, pivoting on those tools to create what was a tool solely focused on providing information of value to the farmer, to becoming a tool, a management system that starts to provide a new type of value, an environmental asset, a carbon credit value. And so there is a lot of learning to happen. And I think an important step in this conversation is thinking about how we're preparing at the farm level all the components in that value chain, from farmer with crop advisor to downstream buyer, to build confidence, learning, capacity, and understanding about pivoting on this digital data collection to become data that is analyzed, managed, and then creates a carbon or a environmental asset that is tradable and has value and integrity. So there's a lot of learning to happen. And I think what you're seeing with everyone on the call today is there's so many components and everybody is engaged in tackling a lot of these different components. So I think there's lots to still happen, but the change has been the number of people engaged and involved in creating a real viable outcome for farms.
Big job, to be sure. Wade.
Yeah, I guess to build off of all of that, I mean, I think that look beyond Manitoba, I look at Canadian agriculture, and I think there's an opportunity here if done the right way. There's a real focus around, and it won't come at a huge cost either, to go out and digitalize these farms in a way that could make, Canada a superpower when it comes to sustainable production with scale. And that's what gets me excited. If I compare, the Canadian farmer to other farmers that we deal with in other markets, I think our infrastructure, we're a long ways along already. And then with a little strategic tweaking, this could get really interesting. And so I'm super hopeful that, you know, Canada can be a global leader around this sustainable production code, because to what Marcel was saying, every food company has a focus right now on ESG. They're going to be looking for low carbon intensity grain, and if Canada can develop a platform that provides that in an effective, scalable way, wow, we're going to be in a really strong position.
Shaq, some closing comments.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it was a very nice discussion, and not all topics were maybe addressed, but I think the challenge for digital innovation is to create data-driven solutions that use this potential of digital data, but at the same time address these what I call grand challenges of sustainable food production, amongst others, transparency and traceability that we in particular try to address. But my main message would be in that in the approach, it's very important to address both technical and organizational issues at the same time. And I would tend to say focus a little bit more on the organizational issues, but okay, you have to also to take care of the technical things. So work on data infrastructures, data analytics, but at the same time start to create awareness and think about the business modeling between all the stakeholders involved, but also look at the governance issues on data sharing, data sovereignty that we discussed, and last but not least also ethics that are around it. So I think Marcel touched upon that a little bit with this opt-in, opt-out discussion. So I think digital innovation has also quite a large impact on, yeah, are people included or excluded? What about power balances between different players in the whole food supply chain? I think these are also issues that really need attention.
Right, well, that's about our time. So thank you very much to all four of you panelists. I know I learned a lot today, and it sounds like a very exciting field, but there's a lot more to come, certainly for Manitoba Protein. So thank you very much, and I'll sign you off now. Have a great day.
Yeah, and let's find a way to get food into the metaverse.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.